So today's workshop is accessibility in college after high school, knowing your needs, understanding the process, and who to talk to. I'm excited to introduce to you Marie Frietze, the ADA coordinator from the Community College of Vermont, and Angie Albeck, Associate Dean of Students, Community College of Vermont. Thank you both so much for joining us.
Thank you, Martha, and I'm going to share our slides so that we can start our presentation. As Martha mentioned, I'm Angie Albeck. I'm the Associate Dean of Students at the Community College of Vermont, and I also serve as the college's ADA 504 coordinator. So unlike my colleague Marie, who you'll be hearing from in a few minutes, I don't get to work with students day to day, but I do get to work with the team and then sort out some compliance questions and things like that. So we're here today to talk about the transition from high school to college, the things that are really important to know in that transition. It's important to know that Marie and I are both representing the Community College of Vermont, and although we are the second largest college in the state, we are by no means the only college in the state or the only college in the country. And there are differences from college to college in terms of how all of these processes work. So we're going to try to cover things broadly, to cover any college, but any specific questions about CCD, we're also happy to answer those questions as well. One important thing to know in the transition from high school to college in the world of disability and disability accommodation is that there's a ton of vocabulary to know, a ton of new vocabulary to know. There are some words that are used in both settings but mean very different things, and there's a whole new set of words too. Some of the words that we'll be using here today are listed on this slide, and I'll go over them. And then there are a list of resources at the end of our presentation too, with a much more robust list of vocabulary words for students and families to know in this transition. We'll often use the word access and accommodation. That's really a condition, policy, or process that enables an individual to effectively participate in a learning environment, which is different from a modification, right? You'll hear that a lot, accommodation versus modification. It doesn't mean we're changing the learning environment. It means we're providing access to that learning environment by removing a barrier. A barrier is something that the college creates or requires that exacerbates challenges for an individual. That can be a building without a ramp. That can be a timed test. What is something that the college has created that is creating a barrier for a student with a disability to having that equal access? We'll talk a lot about self-disclosure and self-advocacy, these last two words. Self-disclosure means you've told someone, you, the individual with the disability, the student, has told someone, I'm a person with a disability and I would like to pursue accommodations. And self-advocacy, letting your accessibility coordinator know when something isn't working out, when the timed test doesn't seem to be giving you the extra time, etc. It's an ongoing process of self-advocacy that the student needs to be engaged in at the college level. These terms will come up again and again, a bunch more will too, but we wanted to cover some of these basics before we got started with some of the other details. So what are the differences between high school and college? There are so many, and it really starts with the laws that govern the K through 12 educational system and higher education, because it is an entirely different set of laws and requirements. As you know, in K through 12, the schools are governed by the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act that requires that students be provided with a free, appropriate public education. It requires the school to identify this is a person who might have a disability. They have to modify the curriculum if the disability is such that this educational opportunity is not accessible for this student. We'll change the educational opportunity so that the student can be successful. Teachers are told how to teach and assess. A teacher might be told, for these students, you're going to be doing this, but for this student, actually, you need to take them aside and do a different thing with them, or provide a different opportunity for them. Progress is monitored by the teachers and the team, and behavior must be accommodated or managed by the school. And once we get to college, it's a totally different law. We're talking about the Americans with Disabilities Act, and to a certain extent 504 as well, which I'll talk about in just a second. But the ADA requires something very, very different. It just requires that colleges make sure our programs are accessible to students with disabilities, that we haven't created a barrier to equal access. And if we have created a barrier, we need to consider accommodations to remove those barriers. The student has to self-disclose. We can't modify the curriculum or tell a faculty member how to teach. Instructors have academic freedom, and instructors are expected to give every student the same educational opportunity. And progress is monitored by the student. The college isn't making sure the assignments are turned in or anything like that. And behavioral expectations are the same. Colleges aren't expected to, in any way, change their behavioral standards for students who have disabilities. Now, I mentioned earlier, the top of this slide says ADA equals college, not ADA/504 equals college. Colleges are still governed by 504. That law still does apply to us, but I think there are so many misconceptions about what that means. Often, I think that means a 504 plan is automatically just the accommodation plan at the college level, and that is in no way the case. Colleges are going to go through their own process to look at documentation, to determine what the barriers are for this student, and to create their own accommodation plan. There's no need to take a student off an IEP and put them onto a 504, because the 504 plan and the IEP, all of those things are just information for the college. They're part of the documentation package that a student will come to the college with. The college will look at it all to determine, okay, for this student and this educational opportunity, what are the barriers to access, and how can we put accommodations in place to try to remove those barriers. A couple of other things I just want to note. A lot of students now are enrolled in early college or dual enrollment. Those are high school students that are taking college classes for both high school and college credit. And it's important to know that regardless of the age of the student, if a student's earning college credit, the college rules apply. So college policies and processes are going to apply to that student, that high school student taking the college class, in their college class. And the student needs to follow the college process to request accommodations. So they will need to provide their documentation, meet with an accessibility coordinator or the disability services office, request those accommodations, communicate them just the way they would once they're in college full-time and a matriculated college student. And FERPA. It's also important to know that that FERPA rules apply in college settings, regardless of the age of the student. So a 17-year-old enrolled in a college class owns their educational records in a way that they might not own their educational records yet at the high school level. It's also important to know that FERPA is about educational records, not actions or decisions. So a person might be on a FERPA release, right? Like I might have permission to access an educational record or get information. That doesn't give me permission to act on behalf of, or make a request on behalf of, or even disclose a disability on behalf of. The student is the primary person now, regardless of their age. And every college is going to have its own process and how a student releases FERPA information and how that communication then happens. Parents and families should not expect to have direct contact with faculty members at the college level. Most colleges have a process where that would go through an advisor or the like. So we just wanted to make sure that was covered as well, that for dual enrollment and for FERPA purposes, college rules apply when we're students in a college class. And then for me, I'm a visual person, so I really like the visual representation of this huge change that happens. So these next two slides are just sort of a visual representation of what's already been covered so far. In high school, who's responsible for what? The school is responsible for identifying the need, testing the student, modifying assignments, paying for testing, checking in and adjusting things as they go, and for guaranteeing that this student can be successful. Parents and guardians, they have a role to advocate for students. They're at the IEP meetings, they're in charge often, and they're making decisions on behalf of the student. And at the high school level, before a student's 18, in terms of this process, they don't have any legal necessarily, and this is a broad generalization, they don't have any responsibilities in the way that they will when they switch to college. Again, regardless of the age of the student, all of a sudden, this becomes the responsibility of the student. The student has to disclose. They have to provide documentation. They have to advocate for themselves in that process because like the college might need more documentation or different documentation or might suggest a different accommodation other than what the student is requesting based on what they understand in the documentation. There's so much that changes for the student. And the school, the responsibilities are very different too. The college has to maintain our standards. That's one of our responsibilities. We have to provide reasonable accommodations, which is different from a modification. We wouldn't change anything about the educational opportunity. We would just provide an accommodation to give access to it. And we can only guarantee access, not success. And you'll see the smallest bubble here now is the parent or guardian who doesn't have any responsibilities technically in this process now at the college level. So I like this. I'm just going to pop back just to, again, highlight this difference. The visual representation is really helpful for me in understanding like how big a transition this really is for our students who are transitioning from high school to college. And I'm going to turn it over to Marie to take over from here.
Thanks, Angie. So again, my name is Marie Frietze. I am the ADA Resource Coordinator at the Community College of Vermont. And part of my role there is doing some direct service with students. So I do advise students academically, and I also am one of the accessibility advisors who works directly with students with this process that I'm about to describe to you. So how do college students get accommodations? So generally speaking, as Angie had mentioned previously, all colleges are engaging in what's called the interactive process. That's a capital I, capital P, interactive process. I believe that's actually the language written in 504. So essentially, as Angie noted, the student is now responsible. If they are looking for accommodations, they need to be the one to self-disclose. So essentially, they're the ones who are telling someone. In this case, telling someone means that they are they're telling their advisor, or they're telling their instructor, or they're simply calling the school and telling whomever answers the phone at the front desk. And ideally, the individuals, the folks working at the school, know the process. Once a student has told them that they have a disability and they're interested in accommodations, whomever they have spoken with knows the process and will inform the student of the next steps. In this case, that would be providing the school with documentation. And Angie has alluded to that already. We've spoken about 504s, we've spoken about IEPs, some other documentation that colleges may request are things like evaluation reports, testing reports, letters from providers such as therapists, psychiatrists, psychologists, doctors, etc. So all of those things may be satisfactory as documentation. Essentially, what is ideal in the documentation is a description of the disability and how it impacts the student academically. It can also be helpful to have some recommended accommodations in the documentation, but that element's not actually required, at least at CCV. What's interesting about this process is that each college has their own slightly unique nuances to what they are requiring. So it's possible that a different school may ask for something that is a little more specific or slightly different than this. Generally speaking, those types of documentations and what needs to be included is what is useful for documentation. Once the school has documentation, the student will meet with someone in accessibility services. So someone like me, for example. At that point, we're really just having a conversation. Ideally, when I have these conversations with students, I want to hear from them about what their experience is like and what has worked for them in the past in their education in terms of what accommodations could be useful. For example, if they have been in classes with timed tests or quizzes, they've benefited from having extended time. And if they're able to share that with me, then that becomes part of what we can consider for an accommodation plan. So that conversation is really important. And we're talking about any of the potential barriers that have come up for them in education so that we can decrease those barriers to provide them access. Thanks, Angie. So during that conversation, we're starting to develop a plan for accommodation. So oftentimes we're able to develop that plan within that same conversation. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer. If there are some things that the student is requesting or mentioning that's particularly unique, something that we've not really considered before, something we need to discuss with the team about, it could take a little bit longer to get that plan officially created. But essentially, these are the steps to receive accommodations. That accommodation plan is intended for the instructor so that they can then make those accommodations available to the student. So for example, if a timed test does need to be adjusted to add extra time, the faculty member can, either if it's an online class, go into the system and adjust the time, or they can talk with the student about, coming in early to take the test or staying later, or any other, type of arrangement like that. But that's essentially the process. Thanks, Angie. So what is a reasonable accommodation? This one can get a little bit murky, and it depends. And there is some language that we use to help guide us when we're, managing some requests for accommodations. So an accommodation is considered reasonable if it does not fundamentally alter the class requirements. So if in college, each course has a set of essential objectives, goals that the student needs to meet in order to receive credit for that class. And a reasonable accommodation does not change any of those goals, does not change any of those objectives for the class. And so kind of as that next point says, every student, regardless of their ability, is expected to meet the objectives of that course. So an accommodation would not be changing those. And it is important to remember that accommodations aren't meant to make college necessarily easier. That may happen, but they're meant to provide the access that the school may have created a barrier to. Thanks, Angie.
Sorry, I accidentally bumped ahead early, I think, so I'll go ahead now.
No, that's okay. All right, so we've talked a little bit already now about the importance of the transition process. And so part of transitioning from high school to college is providing opportunities for the student to identify skills that they're going to need to build on to be successful in college. And if you want to scroll through some of these. So some of those skills, and these of course would apply to all students in college. Time management is particularly important. And I could at least speak for CCV. We offer a lot of online classes, and that is unique to what a lot of high school students are experiencing when they're in class every single day in person for the most part. If a student is transitioning to college and they're starting to experience some online classes, time management's going to be an adjustment, and practicing some of those skills ahead of time is going to benefit the student. We talked about self-advocacy also. One of the things that we've been talking about is the student being able to discuss and share what has been useful for them in high school, possibly. And so practicing some of that self-advocacy and saying, here is what has been useful for me, I think will be really important. And then being able to feel comfortable asking for some support if they are, as Angie mentioned earlier, perhaps not getting the accommodation that they thought they had, or if something is coming up in the classroom that we hadn't considered that became a barrier, we can continue to have that conversation about updating or editing or adjusting any of the accommodations as needed. Being able to study independently will be a very important skill. And then, knowing who to ask for help and using available resources, such as an advisor, such as, library support services, career services. There will be a lot of support systems within the college. And so kind of knowing each one of those buckets will be really useful. And finally, just becoming familiar with commonly used college level vocabulary. A lot of the language that's used, even in this presentation, is probably different than what the students and families are used to. So, words like access and barriers, et cetera. So I think that will be useful before starting college. Thanks, Angie. So we've included our contact information here, and I believe Rachel will be sharing this with you later on. So please feel free to contact us if you have specific questions, or if questions come up for you after this presentation. We're happy to answer any of those. We had mentioned vocabulary, and we've included some resources here. CCV is not affiliated with any of these associations listed or organizations listed below, and each one of them is pretty unique and provides some interesting perspectives on the vocabulary that we've shared today, in addition to many, many others that I think could be useful for you and your families.
Thank you very much for your presentation and all the information you've shared. We have quite a few questions that have been sent to us prior to this presentation, and I'm also noticing we have quite a few in the chat. So I will start by asking, and either one of you are certainly welcome to address the question. So this is from a parent: how to encourage young people who are not wanting to appear different or disclose a disability to seek help.
I can jump in first, and then Marie, in particular with your work currently with students, I think you will have some insight there too. But when I was advising students, and a student would say like, well, I didn't want to come in for accommodations because I didn't want special treatment. What I would say is good, because we can't provide any special treatment. We're not allowed to treat students any differently for any reason. And the process and what's being provided is just a totally different thing. And at the college level, accommodations can't be retroactive. So if I'm a young person starting college and I'm deciding, do I want to go through this process and like maybe feel like I'm being treated differently, or hold off and see how I do? Holding off and seeing how you do is a perfectly legitimate process, but any accommodations that you may be now requesting cannot apply to the past. It's better to have it and not need it than all of a sudden realize you need it and, oh gosh, now I have to get my documentation. Oh gosh, now it's going to be a week before I can meet with the disability services provider. And oh wow, 2 more tests have gone by. Like you get to make the choice. You're an adult now, you're a college student. But if you have it in place and you don't need it, that's a better place than the opposite.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I would just add that when we have our communication letters and our accommodation plan to the faculty member, we emphasize the importance of confidentiality, and we're practicing that as advisors as well. And so, we're not identifying students, nor are we even naming what the disability is in the accommodation letter. So I think that is potentially helpful for students to know.
Great, thank you. So
I'm sorry, there was one other thing that I just thought of to add with that, which is the difference in the college level between accommodations and help. Accommodations are like, you get extra time on your exam, you can have a separate room for your exam or whatever, but there's a ton of help that's available to all students, and students who use that help do better. So if a student feels like, oh, I need extra help, great, use it, because you're going to do better in your classes. Tutoring, academic mentoring, all of those things are available to all students at the college level, and students who use them do better.
Great, thank you. So you brought up some points around evaluations. Parents would like to know how recent documentation do you need? If someone has, let's say, a learning disability or any disability, is providing something from your doctor from 5 or 6 years ago appropriate, or do you need something sooner?
That's a really great question. And I would say that it depends. At the very least, at CCV, it depends. I can't speak for other colleges that may have different policy. So if there has been a disability that has the potential to change over a person's lifetime, for example, I've seen documentation for disabilities related to anxiety and depression. That might be something that we would want somewhat more recent documentation rather than something that has impacted a child from birth and has not changed over the course of their lifetime. So again, it really does depend, but CCV doesn't have a policy that says anything later than 5 years, we need something new. I hope
Okay.
that helps.
Yeah, the general guidance is that the documentation should be current. And what that means is going to vary based on, as Marie said, the disability, the child. But I think if the student and the parent are looking at the documentation, the question to ask is like, does this describe me currently as a student? And if not, it's not current. If it does, it's current. And then the college will, decide based on their own parameters and guidelines what they need in terms of what that means for them. But is it accurate for you right now, today?
Great, thank you. So here comes another one from a parent. How do you handle poor, and I think you did address this. I think you did address this about handling poor high school grades due to ADHD when applying to college. We did talk about that. So we'll move to the next one. From a professional, if a student has a note taker on their 504, but not on the official professional evaluation, will this suffice?
Yeah, so when we're talking about documentation, again, this is at least for CCV, we don't even require recommended accommodations in the documentation. So we're not overly concerned about some documentation, including some recommended accommodations and others not. It's possible that, something may have worked for the student a couple of years ago and stopped working, but may in fact be useful again. As long as the student is making that request and is able to describe how that could reduce a barrier for them, we're not overly concerned about what specifically is written in the documentation as far as recommended accommodations.
And I will also add to what Marie said, and the college is not bound by those recommendations either. So I think the question about the question itself, I think allows for a discussion of a bigger piece, which is the colleges aren't, it's less like a relay race where like we're taking the baton from the high school and more like you were doing shot put and now we're going to start doing pole vaulting or something. So we need to start from the beginning. Okay, who are you as an athlete? What have you tried before? Like we're going to develop our own plan based on this whole new world that the student is in. So we're starting sort of from the beginning and using all of that experience documentation that has happened in the high school to develop our own plan. So I would worry less about what exact accommodations are listed in the documentation and more about, does this documentation thoroughly describe the student so that the college can understand what the barriers are going to be for this student.
Great, okay. Let's see. Here comes another one. I'm going to read this one off the chat. Can it create any documentation barriers if the student requiring accommodations is still in the process of getting a correct diagnosis? For example, a chronic illness.
Yeah, I think it varies by college, right? Like every college is going to have its own documentation guidelines. And so, yes, maybe. And the most important thing is the description of the disability, not the diagnosis. So a student who might be coming to college with, who is meeting with doctors still really trying to figure out like, what is the diagnosis? What is the name for whatever this is, might experience some barriers. But if they can describe what exactly is going on. I'm so easily fatigued and I don't know why. My eyesight gets blurry when I look at a computer screen for more than 30 minutes. Maybe there won't be a diagnosis yet, but if those things are documented, the college may still be able to put accommodations in place of don't even remember what the barriers were that I just said, so I'm not sure. But allowed to print materials so that the student is looking at paper more than they're looking at screens or something like that. That might very well be possible if a student is still in that process, but it's going to vary college by college.
Thank you. So I think this is our last question. This is from a parent. If a student did not have a successful high school experience due to ADHD, anxiety, school refusal, social effects of COVID, and thinks college is not for them, and then later decides it's something they're interested in, what can a student do after high school graduation to help prepare themselves for acceptance into a college program?
That's a really great question. And this is where I kind of want to plug CCV a little bit more. If a student is interested after some time away from school in starting college and starting that process, I think that a school like the Community College of Vermont that has open enrollment, which basically means that we do not admit students based on test scores or essays or fees or anything like that. We admit all students who apply. And that, just knowing that, I think reduces the barrier to anybody who's interested in getting started with college. Otherwise, I would recommend that students are practicing some of those skills that we listed in one of the slides. And those things could be practiced in other areas of their lives. So, time management, figuring out who resources are and whom to ask for help, starting to look at those glossaries of college terms and understanding, what an objective is, understanding what a syllabus is. So some of those common terms, I think, just studying up on those things ahead of time. And it's always okay to contact the school and ask questions. And I can speak for CCV, it's always okay to request a meeting with an advisor before you're even applying to get a sense of what the school is like, what classes are like, getting an idea of what advising is like. So all of those things I would suggest for someone who's taken some time away and are interested in starting the college adventure. Angie, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think absolutely plugging CCV. We're an open admissions institution. We have college classes being offered across the state and online and synchronous, like via Zoom. So it is accessible for students to maybe just try college. It's not no stakes, right? Like when a student is taking a college class, they're paying money or using financial aid, and there are financial implications around that. And a student is generating a college transcript, which is, like when you say permanent record, yeah, like there is now a record that you took this class and what your final grade would be. But it is a way to try college, to do it in a setting that all of our classes are going to be, 18 students or fewer. And if a student is, I think the question was about how does a student then move to I think the word admission or to apply to a program. So then if the student is thinking about applying to a college that does have admissions, the best predictor of how you will do in college is how well you have done in college. So a student might have high school grades that show a wide variety of experiences and factors, but that college transcript is the best indicator of how they will do in college. So also a great way if a student is their experiences in high school were pretty mixed, but now they feel like I'm ready to give this a shot. I've practiced all those skills that Marie outlined in that slide, and I'm ready to self-advocate and engage. And you have a college transcript then that has successful grades. That's a really, really great step up in terms of being admitted then to a college that does have closed admissions.
And one thing I would add is that I think it's really important for students to know and accept that college is going to be hard. Even if they've done time management, even if they know how to study, even if they know all of the jargon and all of the college terms, there will be times in college where it will be hard, and that's okay, and that's normal. There are people to ask for help, and if there is a period of time where it's hard, that period will end and a new period will begin. So I think that knowing that and getting used to that idea, I think is important too.
Great, thanks. And we have more questions coming in. This one is, does the student, and you might, yeah, I think you touched on this a little bit, but I think this person wants to hear a little bit more. Does the student need to come to college with a professional evaluation that's more recent than their freshman year? This student has routine 504 school meetings, but the professional evaluation, will it hold them back, or do we need to advocate to get him evaluated again before he heads to college?
I think that's a great question. If the student is still in high school and there's an opportunity to get reevaluated, I see no reason why not to, particularly since depending on the school that the student might be applying to, they may request a somewhat more recent documentation. If there is an opportunity to do that, maybe for free or without a wait list or something like that, I say go for it. But I can't say that, CCV would require it, but I think if that opportunity exists, then I would encourage it.
Great, thank you. And here's another one, which might be our last one. Oh no, we have, they're all rolling in. If the student entering college post unsuccessful high school experiences, hireability can help through VCAP. I'm a career training and education coach through hireability. Some of the services I provide are helping with study skills and organization for students with varying barriers such as ADHD. Thank you, Stephen, for sharing that. It wasn't a question. You're sharing yourself as a resource, and thank you. Well, now we have, I think, another question. There's less of an opportunity and more advocation. This mama has worked long and hard. Okay, I think that was a comment. And just going through, I think we're just about done. I think the questions are trailing off. Everyone,
Can I
let's
ask a
see.
question? Sorry.
Yes, go ahead. Thank you, Laurel.
So I really appreciate you explaining this to me. I currently have a CCV student with a disability who was in that category that you explained, that didn't do anything until she needed support and then freaked out. And then even with that, she hasn't followed through. And she's not taking a class this semester, but I guess, so we do something kind of along the lines of supported decision making, where much of what she does, I'm there to help her. Her disability is hearing loss, so sometimes understanding things is difficult for her. So how is that approach? I mean, I'm hearing you say that the student is responsible once they're of a certain age, and I guess I'm just curious if she gives permission. Is there any part of that conversation that could include me to help support her understanding, and also, again, like the decision making, like it was hard enough for her even after this struggle started to admit that she had a disability to folks that she didn't know. And so, she had done really fine, and I think she ended up doing fine in this class after all. But I guess I'm just curious how that works if a student would like to have someone, either a guardian or someone else, help them in kind of doing this.
The way we talk about it, Laurel, is that the student's always in the driver's seat. They can invite other people into the car.
Okay.
But the college won't invite anyone into the car, and the college won't speak to anyone but the driver necessarily. But the student can say, like, hey, I want my parent here, or hey, I want this other person involved. They absolutely can do that. They're still, their hands are on the wheel.
Yes, and that's always, kind of we're doing that with medical. There's a lot of medical stuff. And I think the challenge for both or all of us, including her dad, is that there are many things that have transpired over the years to do. And I know it's totally separate from, high school or any other education, but both educationally and medically, that, when I take her to the allergist and he's asking her a specific question, she has the here and now, but she doesn't realize that when she was, 18 months old, that this happened with breathing, or this, so some of that is the same with education, because she doesn't know what she's not missing because she, because she missed it kind of thing. So that's good to know though. So as long as she's okay with a parent or someone being there to support her, but she's making the decisions, is what you're saying. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Laurel. And I'd like to take this time to thank Angie and Marie for this really very helpful information. You'll see the evaluation link in the chat. Please take a few minutes to complete it so we can make improvements and fulfill our grant requirements. I will say that we have many, many more interesting workshops coming up, and you can find details on our homepage of our website, vermontfamilynetwork.org. And the links for previous recorded ones are also there. We've got tons of information on our website. Getting connected with us is really easy. You can follow us on Facebook or join a closed Facebook page. If you're a parent, we also have 2 closed groups, one for parents of children with disabilities and special health needs, and one for those for parents of children with adult children. You can also sign up for our monthly e-newsletter, and check our YouTube channel where all of our webinars are archived. We're here to help, and we appreciate everyone being here today. I appreciate that Rachel has put in some really great links in the chat. Please, for folks that are on this call today, take a look at our transition toolkit. And for the questions that did come up around disability disclosure, there are some links in the chat, which will be included on the presentation when it goes out, around disability disclosure, including a video for families and for youth. So again, thank you everyone who came. Thank you, Angie and Marie. This is a really wonderful presentation, which I know lots of folks are really appreciating. So thanks very much.
Thank you. We appreciate it.